All right, hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Magduit and we are here again with another video, and this time we're actually here with another rack. This is going to be an Ableton Live 12 standard or above rack, so as long as you have 12 standard or above you'll be able to use it. And yeah, we're going to be looking at a drum rack, drum effects rack technically. And yeah, this kind of just is a culmination of a bunch of things I've been doing recently with my drums. I usually would use third-party VST stuff to do all this, but I tried to recreate the feelings that I got from those plugins inside of this rack. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. Let's just jump right into this. Okay, so first up we have the noise knob. As you would expect, this adds a nice little layer of noise over top of the drums. Of course, you can make this as extreme or non-extreme as you want, but let's go ahead and hear how that sounds. And yeah, it's a very like analog thing. That was the goal anyway. It's not supposed to be super overbearing unless you want it to be. And yeah, very tasteful, very wide. I'm a huge fan of this knob. Anyway, on to the next knob. So this here is the slap knob. This knob basically adjusts your transients, and it also turns on a drum bus when you do start activating it. So it kind of creates this nice gluey feeling while also letting you adjust the aggressiveness of your transients. So let's go ahead and hear what that sounds like. And you can hear, obviously these drums are quite transient enough already, but you can hear how with the slap you get that extra little bit of a push on the transients, and I find that to be quite tasty from a timbral perspective on a lot of different drums, but especially on drums that may not have as aggressive of a transient as you want. So really useful, definitely helps your drums, well, dare I say, slap. But anyway, on to the next knob here. Okay, so this is the glue knob, and as you would expect, it's using a glue compressor set to a specific setting that I use on all my drums, basically. This just kind of helps nicely compress everything together. It also really kind of is nice to have when you start turning on some of these other knobs like the reverb knob or the widen knob where you get space, because then it kind of helps glue all the space together with the drums as well. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of glue compressor. Let's go ahead and just hear what it sounds like. As the drums are dry right now, we might not notice it as much, but you will notice it later on when we start experimenting with all these knobs combined. But yeah, this is the glue knob. You can hear it's super subtle. At this point, it's kind of just making it a little bit louder, a little bit more obvious to hear the transients, a little bit punchier. But yeah, like I said, when we start working in some of the other knobs here, you'll really notice it. So stay tuned for that. Let's go ahead and move on to this next knob. Okay, so now we're here at the darken knob. The darken knob is essentially a, well, darkening of the drum bus, but what it really does is kind of create this lo-fi EQ setup or EQ shape, and of course it lets you dial that in. But yeah, it's basically like a lo-fi-ing of the drums. It helps you kind of get rid of a lot of frequencies. It can be useful for things like you know, tonally shaping your drums, or even doing things such as, you know, creating that lo-fi energy, maybe even building up your drums. So if you want to remove information as you're coming close to a drop section, for example, you can use this to kind of cut out frequencies to sort of increase the tension in your drums. So yeah, let's go ahead and hear what this sounds like. Super straightforward, really nice EQing, just does like a good job at creating that sort of old radio effect. So yeah, that's the darken knob. All right, so next up here we have the tighten knob. This knob was kind of difficult to make, and it doesn't do it exactly what I would normally use to do this sort of an effect, but I think it does a really good job at coming close, and it's basically just the best thing you can get out of stock Ableton when it comes to tightening your drums. It's relying on the gates in Ableton, so this is a knob where you're probably really going to have to fine tune this depending on what your drum bus is sounding like, and depending on what drums you even add to your drum bus, you may have to adjust this over time. But let's go ahead and just hear what it sounds like on this drum bus, and as you will hear, it does a pretty good job at tightening the drums. So let's go ahead and listen. You can really hear, we can go anywhere from nothing, of course, to like basically just turning the drums into clicks. And that's kind of where, depending on what your drum bus sounds like, that's really going to determine what, setting this has to be at. The reason why is, as we were getting further and further up, you could even hear we were starting to lose the transient and even existence of the hi-hat. So you'll realize very quickly that this is something you will have to fine-tune, but in my opinion, it does a really good job at tightening the drums. As you can hear, it makes them nice and snappy, nice and short, and yeah, I'm a huge fan of this knob. So let's move on to the next knob. All right, so here we have the reverb knob. It's a classic. I use reverb on my drums all the time. I built this one with a little bit of extra TLC. The goal here was to create a reverb, but to also allow you to maintain some of the dryness that you can expect from drums, especially transients and the real impact of your drums. So there's a little bit of envelope following, and essentially this reverb not only exists, but it lets you maintain a nice dry punchiness to your drums as well. So let's go ahead and listen to what this sounds like. Yeah, so you can hear super, super subtle. Even when it's turned up all the way, we still have all that punch, especially in the kick, things like that. So yeah, I'm really happy with the way this knob turned out. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy that one too. Let's move on to the next knob. Okay, so this is the distortion knob, and this knob's goal is to allow for either subtle distortion or aggressive, weird, broken kind of sounds. And yeah, the distortion itself is a Ableton tube saturator, and the reason why I chose the tube is because I wanted it to feel really analog and kind of play into the whole sort of lo-fi, almost SP404 emulation of the drum FX. So yeah, there's obviously ways to get this to be very tasteful, and of course you can be as extreme or silly with it as you want. So let's go ahead and hear what that sounds like. Yeah, so as you can see, it's subtle enough, especially at the lower levels, to be really interesting and just add a nice little level of kind of distortion-y feeling to it. But then, of course, we can kind of make it just sound broken as we turn it up all the way. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of this one. Definitely excited to show you how that works with the other knobs. But first, we have a few other ones to go over. All right, so next up, we have the widen knob. This is also using a reverb, but it's using one that is extremely short and tiny and really subtle. And the idea here is it's just enough to add some stereo width, but not enough to really make it feel like a room. So yeah, let's go ahead and hear what this sounds like. Yeah, super subtle, as you can hear. And yeah, even when we have it up all the way, it starts to sort of sound like a reverb, but barely. But I think a good sweet spot for this, especially on like a clean set like this one, would be at around 90, maybe even 80. You know, it's enough to add the stereo information, but it's not so much that you can really notice it. And I find that that's kind of the sweet spot for this knob. But yeah, let's keep going on to the next knob. Okay, so this knob was kind of tricky to implement. Normally, I would use the actual Soothe, the OX Sound Soothe for this knob's place, but I'm a huge fan of the Soothe that I made previously. There's a rack that I put out called Micro Soothe, alongside a rack called Micro Clarity. And yeah, this is kind of like a small version of that. I think I did a pretty good job at making it feel transparent enough to not totally change the entire timbre of the drum set. But, obviously do enough soothing to where if you do have some drums that are a little bit harsh, you can do a decent job at cleaning up that harshness. At some of the more extreme settings, it'll literally sound low passed. But yeah, some of the more subtler settings, it sounds quite soothing. And yeah, the big thing I want to point out is that there is a bit of a switch that is flipped on as you get closer to the higher levels. and it literally will go from just soothing it a little bit to literally low passing. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody knows that there's kind of 2 stages to this knob, but it's a nice touch, especially if you're wanting to make your drums as crispy as I tend to. So yeah, let's go ahead and hear what this sounds like. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Just does a good job at soothing some of those high frequencies. I'm a huge fan of this knob and I use it quite often. But yeah, that's all the knobs. Let's go ahead and explore what, we can do when we start combining these together. Before we start, actually, I want to show you a example track. This is kind of what I put together, and then we will of course use the context of the song to mess with the drum effects. So let's go ahead and hear the dry with the clipper turned on, of course, and then we will mess around with these knobs. Yeah, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Now let's go ahead and see what it sounds like when we start messing around with these knobs. And yeah, let's just go over a few of the presets. I added some here on the side that I really liked and thought sounded good. Let's go ahead and just see what they sound like. And yeah, that is the Magduit stock standard drum FX. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. It really means a lot. Please comment, like, subscribe, check out all the other Patreon stuff because there's a lot of it. Obviously, there will be more free things to come in the future. I've also got some fun new stuff planned on the horizon, including maybe some of the drums inside of this video. But yeah, I look forward to making more cool stuff for you. And until next time, peace.